Well, welcome everyone to episode number 30 of EV Society's Canada Talks Electric Cars. I hope you all found a way to enjoy Halloween last night and you aren't now faced with a big bowl of sweet leftovers. But now that we have Halloween in the rearview mirror, we're reminded that winter is not far behind, and with it, those plummeting temperatures. One of the perpetual myths about electric vehicles is that they don't perform well in extreme cold weather. We hear this all too often, and the persistent myth is a real barrier to EV adoption for some people. Cold temperatures impact EVs and combustion vehicles, but sometimes in different ways. Today, with the help of our guest, we will explore some tips and best practices to help maximize the winter performance of an electric vehicle. Jason Arnaud's back. And with a cold, I might add, he's a real trooper, but he will be managing the questions and present your questions to our speaker following the presentation. And I'll just remind you, as usual, that you can upvote any questions that you see already posted just by pressing that little thumbs up button, which will rise it and make it easy for us to prioritize while we still have time. And as usual on time, we will end the webinar no later than 8:30 Eastern Standard Time sharp. Today, we're delighted to welcome back David Giles, an electric vehicle specialist and technician with All EV Canada, to the webinar. David has been involved with the automotive, truck, transport, and collision industries for over 30 years and holds a Red Seal AST certification in Canada, and is also an HRAI instructor for the delivery and certification of for controlled substances. Dave holds several other certifications involving advanced vehicle technology and systems. He's a frequent guest speaker at automotive conferences involving battery electric vehicles and other automotive topics, such as autonomous technology. His passion is to continue to learn and to help find solutions to ensure exciting and sustainable transportation for the future. So on that note, David, I'll get you to join us. There we go. Thanks for coming back and joining us on the webinar.
Thanks, Tim. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to our episode 30, which is actually pretty cool. Tonight's topic is preparing your EV for winter. So tonight we're going to be talking about a lot of high-level things. It's a jam-packed presentation. So I apologize by going a little quicker, but I want to get through the presentation to hopefully get some questions answered, but at the same time, maybe spur some questions that you may have as I go through that you can ask at the end. So anyways, I was a co-founder of All EV Canada. I continue to work in training and development for the Steel Auto Group for All EV Canada. And lots of really cool things are happening with All EV and especially some of the new partnerships that we have formed across Canada. One just recently with Consulab, which is a global product provider for training aids, and they're heavily getting into the electric vehicle training. So that means colleges and education facilities will have opportunity to teach electric vehicle technology in their classrooms using vehicles and components from electric vehicles. So anyways, we're going to get started here. Like I said, my presentation is probably going to run about 35 minutes. I'm going to go a little quicker, so hopefully that helps with lots more time to ask questions. I know there's going to be a lot of people that want to ask questions. As Tim mentioned, I've been working on vehicles for over 30 years. So I know how they work. I know what to do with them. I know the integral parts of the ICE vehicles to the truck and transport industry, collision, as well as obviously the automotive. All EV Canada is home to the interactive demo electric vehicles. First one on the bottom corner was our skateboard platform, which was used more for showcasing electric vehicle components. Our newest version of the iDev is a fully operational powering up vehicle that can be, that can allow people to see the actual function of electric vehicle with the high voltage battery in it. So really cool, great for conferences and so on. I just want to make a point at the end of this presentation. I'll have my contact information, my question. because one of the things that we want to do in this presentation is we don't want to be talking about manufacturers. I don't want to be talking about brands, different brands and so on, as well as pricing. We don't want to be asking questions about pricing or cost and things of different products that are out there, as well as we won't be talking about specific products. But if you do have a question about one of those four things, which I'll mention a little bit later on, please feel free to contact me. I have my number at the end of this presentation, as well as my email. So just let you know, if you do have a question about a product or a system, or you're looking at some different options with value on something, please feel free to reach out, but we just won't be doing it through this presentation. So we're gonna get started. I like to always say, what is winter driving? So one of the big things that happens is, we have incidences where we have, different parts of the country with the winter. So like, parts of the country will get extremely cold, -30, -40 degrees, very little snow, but very harsh cold temperatures, where other parts of the country during wintertime might get a lot of snow, but milder temperatures. And you might get a combination of cold, snow, and so on. Where I'm at in Halifax here, in basically the East Shore, we get a lot of ice, we get a lot of rain, and we get a little bit milder temperatures, and very much like BC as well. In Ontario and Quebec, they get, a combination of snow, ice, very cold temperatures, and that's originally where I'm from, is from Ontario. So I get how cold it can get out there as well. So we're going to be touching on a very high level of what is winter driving, because that's really what it is, and how to prepare your EV for winter conditions. So what does winter driving do? What does it change in an electric vehicle? It changes how we charge. Whether we're charging inside or outside. Typically people take their vehicles inside if they have a garage to do their charging. If you leave it outside, it can have some adverse effects on charging speeds and how you charge that vehicle and when you charge it. Vehicle driving, conditions changing, the characteristics of the vehicle, especially with winter tires on the vehicle, and so on. Range is obviously a big question that comes up, as people always talk about, oh, I'm going to lose a lot of my range. Well, you don't actually lose range. You're just using the energy differently. We're going to talk about that this evening. We're going to be looking at vehicle preparation. What do you need to prepare your vehicle for winter? Whether it's extremely cold temperatures, or if you're in in a very wet environment, or a very snowy environment, vehicle preparation will change depending on where you're located and so on. Road conditions also change with winter weather. The asphalt gets colder. There's slush, there's ice, there's snow, they're wet. So that affects range as well, but we'll talk about that. Your tires that you use, what are winter EV tires? A lot of brands now have come up with new tires that are designated for electric vehicles. And we're going to talk about what that means and what that does, as well as visibility. Visibility is another big issue. It doesn't affect just electric vehicles, but can affect ICE-powered vehicles as well too. So we're going to talk about that. But some of the systems that affect the visibility, like frosting up of the windows and so on, or even snow on the vehicle, affects electric vehicles a little bit more than it does ICE-powered vehicles, and we'll talk about that as well. So cold weather effects on vehicles. So obviously when you have cold weather that is denser and holds more moisture, snow and rain, it's a lot more pushed through that air. So usually in the colder weather, you're going to lose some range just from the aerodynamics of the vehicle. Not very much, but once again, it's a consideration to happen that affects cold weather, especially very damp and when you get snow and rain and so often in the atmosphere, you wind up with a little bit more resistance on the drag on that vehicle. Temperature of the battery, reducing output and input. So essentially the output of the battery powering your electric drive units and so on is going to be a little bit reduced, because the energy that's being dissipated out of a colder battery will be slower. So of course it's going to affect the output, also the input too. When you're charging, same thing. So once again, it's harder for energy to be recharged into a colder battery. So there's some things and strategies that manufacturers do to help with that. But the thing is also you're using that extra energy to help passengers and components keep warm as well too. So cold has effect on metal, as science knows that metal and components are affected by very cold temperatures. So causing it to shrink and have adverse effects on stress on a vehicle. I'm going to show a couple of examples as we move through this tonight. Salt, brine mixtures on components, protection of the vehicle, drain ports, and so on need to be addressed with electric vehicles. And electric vehicles do have a little different setup for ensuring drainage of water, especially under their underbelly pans and so on. So we're going to take a little bit look at that as well. Cracked glass and wiper sticking and damage to windshields from cold temperatures. See a little bit talk about that. These are some of the effects of cold weather. Affects gas-powered vehicles as well, but electrics are also not not inherent to the same problems. And a lot of the windshields in these cars are very, very thin. In fact, like a Model 3 roof glass probably weighs about 15 pounds. It doesn't weigh that much, and it's a very large piece. A lot of people think it weighs a lot, and it doesn't weigh very much. Same as windshields as well. And a lot of glass is getting thinner and thinner based on the engineering of the window itself. So once again, freezing or fogging on the inside glass, we're going to look at that, some of the conditions that happen, because we can warm these vehicles up by preconditioning them very, very quickly, which means that it can create a lot of moisture that freezes against the colder glass, especially in very cold temperatures. So we're going to talk about that as well. Tire pressure is a very interesting topic. Several years ago, we had a lot of things with tire pressure monitoring on vehicles. We're going to look at some of that with traction issues, especially with winter tires and all-weather tires. Regeneration and power output, two very big areas, especially when it gets cold. We're going to look at some of the conditions with that, as well as charging speeds and battery conditioning. So winter weather will affect a lot of these areas, and plus many more. So we're going to take a look at lots of different things in this quick presentation on winter, preparing your vehicle for winter driving. So preconditioning is a big topic, especially in colder weather. Manufacturers have very numerous ways of doing it. Depends on their thermal management system. So one strategy that somebody said is like you could wait and pre-charge your vehicle or charge your vehicle post later in the evening into the later or early morning. And this way, when you wake up, the car has been charging since 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. And, basically the battery's warm and you can precondition the interior of the vehicle rather than doing it from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. that, then at 1 a.m. it shuts off, but you still can precondition. But like me, sometimes if you don't set the timer and you have to do it automatically, you may only have about 4 to 10 minutes of precondition time, which isn't enough for the battery to get warm. Interior of the cabin gets warm, but the battery itself, might not be that condition. So your regen and your power output may be lowered during those colder battery temperatures till the battery can actually warm itself up. So some of the things that can happen with preconditioning, basically charging to 80% this way will warm the battery, regen will operate, and battery is warm. So if you do charge later in the evening or into the earlier morning before you leave and your charging is finished at that time, a lot of times your battery will be at temperature because the charging going into the battery, the charge going into the battery will keep that battery warm, and then basically wake up and you can have a warm interior as well as a battery that's warm, and effectively you'll retain the performance and the regen within that vehicle. But I'm going to talk a little bit about regenning in the winter time as well too, because regen in the winter time can also be a problem, especially with electric vehicles. So but we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. Once again, safety on winter driving, there's lots of different things. I do lots of videos on vehicles, electric vehicles, especially questions that come up when I hear people talking about charging in the winter and so on. I'm just going to shut this off here, but just show you a quick about charging a vehicle and safety around it. So I actually take a 220 volt cable and basically I put it in a bucket of water while it's plugged in to show and demonstrate that the the isolation faults and that on the vehicle during the wintertime won't be an issue. You can leave your car outside, plug it in, you won't have any problems with it. So even if snow gets jammed in the end of it or not, there is absolutely no power to the end of this connector. So during the time that you have that you ever drop a connector into a puddle or something like that, you're not going to have an issue with it at all. So intake it, once again, just take it, plug it back in, and there's no risk of any hazards of shock and whatnot. So, and that's part of the safety systems the vehicle and the chargers have. So, and during the communication process. So just a little bit of that, and just a really quick show, once again, there's no issues there at all. So, and I'm still here. Let's shut this off here. Oops, this seems to move forward. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that does come up a lot is about the frosting in the inside of glass. Obviously, we know that the frosting comes from the inside of the glass. As you clean the outside of your vehicle, you clean the outside of the windshield. But as you start driving, you'll notice that frost will start forming on the inside of the glass. You can turn your heater on high, full blast on full defrost on that windshield, and the windshield will actually start increasing how fast it frosts up. And that's because of the moisture inside the vehicle. As you walk into a vehicle with snow and whatnot on your boots, and you turn the heat up, obviously the water is going to start to evaporate. As that moisture starts to hang out inside the cabin of the vehicle, as you're driving down the road, the windshield is very cold. It's cold outside. So what happens, those moisture droplets attract themselves to that cold windshield and basically start to freeze. So one thing is that running the AC, if you ever notice in a lot of cases that when you put it on defrost, you may see the AC turn on. And that's because the air conditioning system acts as a dehumidifier as well. So trying to remove some of the heat from inside the vehicle. So once again, and keeping those air intake vents clean as well too. When you cover, when you're cleaning off the outside of your vehicle of snow and so on, make sure that the vents that cover where the air intake comes in just below the wipers is also clear of snow and ice and that, because that outside air can be introduced back into the cabin of the vehicle. If you put it on recirculate inside the vehicle, that means any moisture in that's in the floor, in the floor mats and that can also be picked up and put through the heater, which then can start to escalate the condensation, or sorry, the moisture, the evaporation that's happening inside the vehicle, and then it starts condensing on the windshield. So it's important to make sure you try and minimize the amount of water inside the vehicle. But if you can't, then run the air conditioning, as crazy as that sounds or funny as that sounds. When you put on defrost, if you see the AC on, and even though it's cool, or sorry, warm, the air conditioning is actually engaging the evaporator to try and remove some of that moisture from inside the vehicle. Outside the vehicle, once again, cleaning off the windshield, very simple, but once again, solutions are made. Some people put rubbing alcohol or alcohol within in the washer fluid, solutions that you can spray on the windshield. These windshields are very thin, and of course the rapid heating that can happen inside these vehicles, heat moves from hot to cold. So which means that if you have a very hot interior, or you're turning on the heaters very quickly, especially if they're resistance heaters, and the outside glass is very, very cold, basically, you'll wind up having that heat transfer through the glass, which can crack the windshield. So once again, it's a good idea to make sure that if you are doing anything with the vehicle and cleaning the glass, that that if you're going to put a solution on it, there's it's like 2/3 of a cup of rubbing alcohol to 1/3 cup of water, put in a spray bottle, and that will actually really clear the glass pretty quick. As well as make sure your wipers and that are also properly operating. Make sure they're not jammed up, and make sure that also you run winter wipers if your vehicle's capable of it. That will prevent ice and that from building up on them. But never pour hot water on a windshield or roof glass of a vehicle to try and clear it, because that will be pretty much a quick way of damaging windshields and roof glass on some of these vehicles. So air conditioning checks, part of your fall maintenance into the winter time. Have the air conditioning checked out. Make sure it's working properly. Effective defrosting of the vehicle, air conditioning, climate control, battery thermal control of that vehicle. So even though it might be working, but it might not be working to optimum performance, to make sure it gets checked out. Your vehicle may have a heat pump. It still uses refrigerant in a heat pump system. So make sure that is working properly before going into the winter. So not just for the summer for air conditioning, and not just for your heating in the winter if you're running a heat pump, but also the efficiency and the performance of the system is very important. So once again, getting your air conditioning checked out before the winter is not a bad thing, especially if you're running into any kind of issues with defrosting of your glass. That's a good sign that you may have some issues running with your air conditioning. Preconditioning, winter modes, you'll see different things with preconditioning a vehicle. Once again, you could be setting timers to warm the interior and so on of the vehicle. But also keep in mind that the battery itself also needs to be warmed if you want optimum performance. Some of the winter modes, to better understand them, some of them are strategies within the vehicle itself. Winter mode in certain vehicles can basically use more energy from the battery to help keep things moving, so keep your performance up, keep the battery warm, but they do affect range. So once again, become familiar with your winter mode. Some vehicles have battery heaters in them. Some of them just use strategies within the drive units and the motors to help warm the batteries, depending on the thermal management system in that vehicle. The biggest thing with ICE vehicles, electric vehicles or EVs that I recognized when I first started was that they don't melt the snow off the hood or the frunk, as some would call it. There's no combustion engine underneath there. So in combustion gas engines, they have a lot of wasted heat energy that essentially can help reduce the amount of snow and ice buildup on hoods and front ends of the vehicle. Well, EVs don't have that luxury. So once again, if you don't clear the ice and snow off the front of your hood, one is going to affect range for sure, because you're now no longer slippery going down the road for aerodynamics, but also it can also cause more slush and more ice to freeze on the front of your vehicle. So, and can affect visibility. So it's always good to keep your vehicle clean, clear. Just as you're going into the winter, maybe take it in and have it, waxed or, some sort of protective coating that prevents snow and ice from really grabbing onto it and getting off. Sometimes you just can't help it, depends on where you are. But we don't have that luxury with EVs. Even if your EV has its motor drive unit, DC to DC, inverters, converters, all underneath the hood, there isn't enough heat generated by them to help melt that snow and ice off the hood of the vehicle. So that means you got to clear your car properly before leaving. Some people will put car covers over their vehicles. And then in the morning, they brush off the snow off the car cover, then they pull the car cover off. There's ones that go over the windshield and glass. So various options for doing that, but trying to reduce the amount of buildup on the vehicle, and plus also adds weight to the vehicle too. So cleaning and waxing, coating, so snow is harder to stick. Protective rubbers, so rubbers themselves around the doors, around your charge doors, and so on. Silicone sprays is usually pretty much an ideal for most rubbers and foams. The problem with silicone spray, it lasts a very short time. Some people told me about using WD-40. Problem with WD-40 is that it has adverse effects on foam rubbers and stuff like that. So the best method is really wiping down your doors around the sills, keeping a rag inside the vehicle or in the trunk, and then wiping down the rubber seals around the door frames so the rubber can't freeze, or there's nothing for the rubber to freeze again. So, but if you do have a lot of moisture there and so on, you're more prone to freezing and so on within those areas. Charge doors are the worst. So once again, keeping them clear and dry of any moisture and snow so they don't freeze up either. Lighting systems on today's vehicles, because electric vehicles are trying to reduce the amount of power A lot of them have gone to LED lights, moving away from halogen and HID lights. HID is high intensity discharge. But the thing is, once again, headlights can start building up with ice and snow, especially while driving. And then you have very low visibility with lighting. Pam cooking spray is actually a good product. It won't hurt the lenses of the vehicle, and it'll allow the snow and that not to stick to those lights. But once again, people might think you're cooking on the outside of your car if you're spraying Pam on the outside of it. But once again, it's you can wax some of these lights. There's kits that you can buy for headlights to not just to clean off any kind of some of the yellowing that happens, but also they do for protective coating like a wax on them afterwards. So you can use some of that as well, keep them from freezing up. Also, another point too is, which is a really good point, because these vehicles, a lot of them have their radar, LiDAR, sonar sensors in the bumper covers and that. It's always a good idea to make sure they're all cleared off as well too. So in the morning when you go out, there's snow down, make sure they're cleared off, or else you may have some parking sensor issues, side collision sensors or in the rear back bumpers. You may have some radar units that might be skewed because of ice buildup and snow buildup on the bumper. So once again, it's a good idea, keep these areas clean because it's all part of your ADAS systems. That's the advanced driver avoidance systems on the vehicles, as well as some of the cruise control and that. And some vehicles that if you have a radar unit that's in a bumper that's affected, it may affect your regen too, especially if you have a multiple regen system. So it's always good to keep everything clean and free, waxing your car, keeping it clean, free of the debris and the ice and snow buildup will definitely help with keeping systems operating as they should. One thing that we do sometimes forget about is our 12-volt batteries. 12-volt batteries in electric vehicles are no different than our ICE vehicles. Yes, some of them are AGM, advanced glass mat batteries. Some of them are like flooded lead acid batteries, but a lot of cases are smaller batteries and they do a lot of work. And 12-volt batteries work hard in the EVs. One, because they do control the high voltage system, but they're also responsible for the 12-volt systems on the vehicle. So these little batteries, in some cases a lot smaller than a comparable ICE vehicle, can take a real beating. So it's a good idea in the fall and spring to have them periodically checked, for performance. Because one thing is, if that 12-volt battery doesn't work, it won't power up the contactors and the controllers in the vehicle, which then it can't turn on the high voltage system, which then your vehicle will not start. As well as I've been finding more and more as these batteries fail, the way they fail is that sometimes even trying to boost them won't work. They get internally shorted and you can't boost them. And so it's a good idea to make sure that you check have the battery checked out, make sure the post and terminals are clean and free of any corrosion in that, to ensure that they will work in extremely cold temperatures. So I know there was somebody that said they one thing but they like about EVs, even at minus 40 degrees, they'll always start. Yes, they will. The high voltage batteries there, contactors close, you will have power to the electric motor. But if the 12-volt battery can't take it, it won't turn on the high voltage system. So it's a good idea to have these things checked out and replaced as necessary. One thing about EV servicing, if you take your vehicle in for EV servicing, you got to remember the difference between ICE-powered vehicles and EV vehicles to a service center that you're taking to, especially for winter servicing. One thing about winter servicing on a conventional ICE-powered vehicle, a lot of ICE customers, what they're looking for is reliability and longevity of their vehicle. So basically oil change and that, because they know their parts wear on these cars and they want to maximize the life. Well, EV owners know they don't have the wear and tear items on the powertrain as a conventional ICE vehicle. So, a lot of EV owners are looking for efficiency and range when they get their vehicles maintained. So when you're putting winter tires on the car or you're doing different things to the vehicle, you want to make sure that that, you know, whoever's looking at the vehicle or working on it understands that that's what you're looking for. You're looking to maximize your efficiency with the things that you want to do to prepare for winter, and you want to maximize that range as well too. So it's something to keep in mind. And if somebody asked me, so what do you look for in a shop that's that services electric vehicle, and get them to ask them, do they understand what they need to maintain on the electric vehicle? And it's not just the components that need the maintenance, but understanding what the EV owner is looking for is efficiency, and that range is very important to them, because they know that that they typically will last. So these cars are lasting a very long time with the new batteries and that, and very few moving parts on them. So the typical services are still there. So we still have our tire rotations, our alignments, our brake caliper servicing, cabin air filters, battery service in the 12-volt battery, rocker underbelly pan cleaning, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Rocker guard cleaning, suspension steering checks, which are very important points to have inspected before winter. Electric vehicles do not eliminate maintenance items required to operate these vehicles. Yes, they remove some of the components and maintenance, such as oil changes and so on, and certain coolants and whatnot, but they still have, these are still vehicles that still need maintenance to ensure their efficiency and their range. Because with very cold temperatures, I talked about earlier, has a stress point on parts, on metals and stuff like that. And because these vehicles are heavier and they go down these bumpy roads, especially in the wintertime, they can put more and more stress on some of these components. So, and we do see some failure more so in the wintertime than summer weather. And that's because of our road conditions, our temperatures, and all these things play a role there. Winter tires is a big issue, is another big, not issue, but another big topic that comes in with winter driving. So one of the things that comes up in the past years, there really wasn't a tire designed for EVs, and it was really hard to get a good winter tire or snow tire for an electric vehicle. There was manufacturers out there that could work within the specifications of the vehicle, but once again, they weren't really designed as for EVs. And now they've come up with tires. Pretty much all manufacturers are coming out with EV winter tires. And some of these things come into the higher pressures that these cars require, load capacity of the tire, and many other things that can affect the vehicle as well. So what I put here is one of the big things that does come up with EVs is their weight. The weight of the vehicle is a lot higher than a conventional gas vehicle because of the battery and motors and so on. So one of the things is the load rating on a tire is very important. Behind the tire size, and I have it circled there in the orange on the left side of the screen, is 91. In the center is a load index card, which tells me that 91 represents 1,356. So which means that my load carrying capacity of that one tire is capable of 1,356. On the door tag of my vehicle, it shows me the GAWR, which is the gross vehicle weight for the gross vehicle axle for the front and rear fully loaded. That includes all carrying capacity of the passengers and cargo, as well as what the vehicle weighs and carrying on that axle. So the two axles put together with full load in the vehicle rates this vehicle at 5,248 pounds. So if I take my 91 and go to my chart and it says that tire is capable of 1,356 pounds, I apologize, I use pounds, but not kilograms. But anyways, that's the chart I had here. If I take 1,356 with 4 tires, this load index of this vehicle can carry 5,424 pounds. And this vehicle weighs, fully loaded with everything in it, weighs 5,248 pounds. So these tires would be applicable to this vehicle based on that load rating. If you're ever unsure, check with whoever's putting your tires on your vehicle to make sure that load rating matches the vehicle's card. And this card is found in just as you open the driver's side door, this card is located inside that driver's door, and make sure that the tires that you're putting on the vehicle at least have that special load rating. If they do, that means they can carry the pressures and so on that vehicle requires. So what are winter tires? What's happening with winter tires right now? Well, some of the things that are happening with winter wheels is that the manufacturer coming up understanding the torque of these vehicles are very low, so they have more grippy tires, different compounds to make them a little softer, but they also have to have the rolling resistance that is anticipated to effectively increase or maintain range and efficiency of that vehicle. Sidewalls are a little stiffer, a little thicker for lateral movement because within the winter time, your cars are moving around a little bit more. The road conditions are a little bit worse, and turning and cornering, they can't be a real soft walled side tire. So once again, lateral movement, efficiency, obviously load index, I just talked about that, has to match with that OE requirement. Tread design for noise, traction, all these things goes back into the grip and the performance of it, and maintenance of these tires. These tires in the past, EV tires are usually about 20% harder on tires than conventional ICE vehicle. And we want to have tires that will maintain themselves in the sense that regular tire rotations won't sacrifice the tire, especially in wintertime with some of the things that are, that happen with tires and so on. So we want to make sure that our winter tires last as they would on an ICE powered vehicle, and manufacturers have come to the table and have EV winter tires, designated tires that they have spec'd and designed and built for just EV vehicles. So, make sure you're asking for an EV tire for your vehicle. If you're unsure, check back with the manufacturer and they will have a recommendation for tires for your vehicle. All tires lose air. And I'm going to get into a little quickly here, just so I know our time. But once again, rubber is not 100% impenetrable. So that means that air leaks out. And in the industry, it's about 1 psi per month under normal conditions. But as temperatures drop and temperatures fluctuate back and forth, we can see as much as a 5 psi difference on extremely cold days. That means that the tire pressure will drop, and that's because the moisture inside the tire actually condenses. When it condenses, it lowers the air pressure inside that tire. As the tire warms up, basically the moisture inside the tire can expand, and with the air, you can increase the pressure. So if you have a minus 30-degree day, you can drop almost 5 psi on tire pressure. And some of you have experienced that, where you now have low tire warning code lights on your dash. It's a very cold day. You go and you refill your tires up. You fill them back up to the 42 psi if that's what the car takes. And then all of a sudden you get a couple of warm days. It hits, 15, 20 degrees. Now your tires go from 42 psi and they can climb all the way up to 47 psi or even 45 psi, which now they can be considered overinflated, which would cause quick wearing and handling with those tires. So tire pressure fluctuation has been an issue within the industry under the Tread Act from 2000, I should say, not 1990, since 2000. The Tread Act, which incorporated tire pressure monitoring of vehicles to help prevent vehicle rollovers, increase efficiency, and so on, is still affected by tire temperature and pressure. So one thing that people do ask me all the time is about putting nitrogen into tires. Nitrogen is a great idea. Airplanes use it, race cars use it. It's not affected by temperature, not too much, maybe a PSI based on temperature and how much purity of nitrogen you have. One thing about using nitrogen in tires is that whoever's installing the nitrogen has to have proper equipment, also has to be able to manage the purity of that nitrogen. So if you're not getting anywhere from, it says 95 to 100%, if you're not getting anywhere from 99% purity of nitrogen in tires, it's kind of a waste of time. But is it worth it? Some people say it is. It can be anywhere from $5 to $25 for per tire for nitrogen. But if it can increase your efficiency without tire fluctuations, increase the longevity of your tires because it doesn't create adverse wear on tire when the tires get low, helps with handling. It is a great asset to add to your vehicle. But people ask me, if I put nitrogen in my tires and I have to add air to the tire because I ran over a nail and it's leaking, yes, you can put air into the tire. The only problem is that the benefits of nitrogen are gone. We breathe 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other gases. So you're already putting nitrogen in, it's just not enough to affect it. You have to have specialized equipment to make sure the purity of nitrogen is in that tire. Vehicle maintenance, obviously we have underbelly pan cleaning, bumpers, cameras, coolant services with the vehicle. Undercoating is another question. Over the summertime, you'll start collecting dirt and debris under the underbelly pans. The problem with that is it can plug up the holes for drainage. The debris in that can, obviously hold moisture and cause some issues. So probably when you take your car in for service, or if you do it yourself, if you can get the belly pans down, clean them out, make sure the drain holes are clear and free. And this way it prevent, from ice building up when moisture and snow and so on, if it can at least drain. Undercoating and underbody protection is something that comes up all the time. People ask, like, if I undercoat my vehicle, I will void my warranty. Well, Steel Auto Group, one of the largest auto groups in Canada, owns 28 different manufacturers of vehicles and have over 60 dealerships in North America. The problem with undercoating a vehicle and voiding warranties is how the product is applied and the types of product and where you put them. So a proper application of undercoating under a vehicle won't affect the warranty on the vehicle unless it directly affects that component that's now being questioned for warranty. Typical undercoating on our vehicles when we do electric vehicles, and a few shops in Canada that do it with a procedure in place, usually takes between 4 and 6 hours to do a single vehicle for undercoating. In fact, we use less product in doing undercoating in this method than a conventional vehicle and gas vehicle where just, somebody goes underneath and just sprays the vehicle and puts it everywhere. It's a very strategic way that they're applied. Each vehicle is very different. And the products that we use are environmentally friendly products, as well as they're, and they're very, I'd say, very safe to use as well. Like, our technicians still wear masks, but actually the product says we don't actually have to. So which is really great. We know they're safe, environmentally friendly, and the application is placed in a way that doesn't affect any of the high voltage components. It stays away from everything, and it affects only the areas that will have corrosion problems. So it's a real big area. And I know people will be very like, well, it avoids my warranty, it can do this and that. If you got a car that's just absolutely coated and caked in undercoating, and you have a component failure and it looks like undercoating or some sort of product has gotten into it, then yes, definitely would be a problem. But if you're just strategically putting in places that we do it, in fact, when we do ours, we would take it down, we paint any components that have look like there's wear or anything on them before the vehicle actually gets some of its application. So there are probably lots of questions on that. That could be a whole sort of topic in itself. So alignments, once again, critical for tire efficiency. Most OE recommend 22,000 kilometers a year. Once again, some manufacturers special alignments is great. If you're driving down the road with tires that aren't perfectly aligned in the summertime, it's not going to really affect the vehicle as much as it will on ice. So it's very important when you get your tires switched over, get an alignment done on the vehicle, and then when you switch your tires back over after one winter bumpy road, you put your summer tires on, get it aligned again. It's cheap, quick, easy of maintenance, but also it can increase efficiency and performance of your EV. Brake caliper service, one thing I mentioned earlier, because of cold temperatures and battery temperatures, you're going to have reduced regeneration, which means that you're going to be using more of your conventional brakes. Nothing's worse than not using your brakes all summer and some of it's seized, and now you're wanting to rely on your brakes, and you have calipers that are, caliper brackets and sliders and pins that are seized. That means only one part of your brake pad may be moving, the other is not. So it will reduce the braking performance of your vehicle. So it's a good idea, once again, when you take your car and have that brake caliper service done, have the head brakes looked at, make sure they're functioning properly, as well as the regeneration on your vehicle. In very cold temperatures, it's better to put your regen on its lowest setting, because as you're coming up to the light or something that you're coming up to a stop, you let your foot off the accelerator and it starts to regen, and it's a slippery road. Those vehicle tires could spin or slide. So once again, reducing your regen, using your conventional brakes, but make sure your conventional brakes are properly working, because in cases like this vehicle here, this vehicle only had 16,000 kilometers on it, and the pins on this vehicle were actually seized in there. Not super bad, but bad enough that I had to use a lot of force to move them, which they should be free floating. So once again, it's important that these things are maintained. Sometimes just a quick, move them around, twist them up, get the grease in that moving, and that will help prevent them from having problems later on.
Hey, Dave, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I know that we've got a bunch of questions. I don't know
Yep.
where you are on your
We're
deck.
one slide out.
All right, then I should have just sat on my hand.
I'm blowing through it. So yeah, one slide out. We're just about done here. So last thing is what rocker, mud flaps, and so on. Make sure the body's protected. But if your car does have mud flaps and rocker guards on them, once again, drop them down. There's drain ports in them. Over the summer, they can get mudded up and blocked, and they can't drain properly. So once again, make sure these things are all done. Part of that winter package thing. So just as Tim came on there, so this was my last slide. This is my contact information. I went through that very quickly. I apologize, but I know there's going to be questions here. If you have questions, even after the seminar, this is my information. You can get a hold of me from there.
All right, awesome, Dave. Thanks a lot. Now, to go through some of these questions while we are able to, Jason. And everybody, Jason's a trooper. He's here with a bad cold, so bear with him a little bit here.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, David. I'll dive right into it. First question is, I have a 2020 Tesla Model 3, and this winter I'll be away for 10 weeks, starting in the first week of December. The car will be parked in a garage with the charge cable plugged in. Is this okay? And what other precautions should I be taking?
So what I would do in that case, I'd reduce the charge down to 70%. So set your charge rate to about 70% on the vehicle and just leave it plugged in. It would be no problem. If you get into a situation where you can't plug your vehicle in, it's better to charge your vehicle up and then unplug the 12-volt battery on the vehicle, or disable the vehicle system. They actually call it, if I remember right, it's like freeze clamping or thermal clamping. Lithium-ion batteries, after they get charged up and they can be frozen in a sense of that case, they will maintain some of their longevity. So, but a lot of cars, what will happen is if you don't plug them in and just leave them, the software in the vehicle, if it gets really cold, everything is designed to protect the battery. So what they'll do is they'll keep warming the batteries up using the energy from the vehicle. So once again, I refer back to the OE, depends on the type of thermal management system in your vehicle. But with your Tesla like that, I would just keep it at 70 to 80%, just leave it plugged in, and it'll manage itself. But if it's when you can't plug the vehicle in and you have to leave it for that amount of time, and it'll start using the energy, and it can eventually basically drain that battery right down. So
the other suggestion I've seen for Teslas and other connected cars is don't keep checking your app, because every time you check your app, the car wakes up.
That's right.
And if it's not plugged in,
thank you. Yes, that's very correct. Every vehicle is a little different, but definitely on Tesla, you will wake that car up every time you do that.
And also turn off Sentry mode, because that will chew up on a Tesla a lot of capacity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Next one is annual rust proofing. Good idea or no for an EV?
Well, I just talked about that annual rust checking in a vehicle, but doing no issues with doing it, but having it done properly. That's the key. Having that annual rust check done on a vehicle, touching it up, but having a professional that is an EV person where they're not spraying it. And the biggest problem with the EV, and I'm working with first responders right now, right across Canada on some of their things, and some of this undercoating stuff can be like a dark color, some of it's black, And unfortunately, some people spraying the stuff will spray it right over top of the orange cables on the vehicle, and they're harder to identify, especially in the event of an accident or whatnot. So, and then also the product themselves. Why OE doesn't do it is because some of these products are petroleum based, and the rubber seals in that within the isolation of these cables could be attacked by these products. So so sometimes some of it's fine, some of it's not fine. They're not going to spend the time figuring out which ones are good, which one's bad. They say no undercoating, and we'll void your warranty if you do it. But if you do it properly and it's discreet enough, and you're only attacking the areas that will be corrosion issues, then obviously it's not going to affect any warranties. But if you're spraying directly on top of DCs and motor drive units and stuff like that, then you're really, you could be in a problem situation if there's a warranty issue involved.
Okay, next one. This is an interesting one. Is it better to have a two motor, i.e. four-wheel drive, or single motor drive in the winters?
It can be both. So the thing is, with the weight of these vehicles, and historically we always say, like, rear wheel drive EV is great, front wheel drive EV is great. I find that the front wheel or all wheel drive EVs, especially, I'm just going to talk in the sense of a Tesla all wheel drive. I don't like talking brands and manufacturers, but it really comes down to the performance of the vehicle with the all-wheel drive. But if you depends on where you live and what you're driving through. If you're going through deep snow, you have a lot of snow, very cold temperatures, and all-wheel drive is a real benefit in those types of those conditions. Other areas, really it comes down to the performance of the vehicle. Having that extra motor, can really help with launching the vehicle, getting up to speed quickly. Benefits in the wintertime might not be that much. So I drove standard range pluses, I drove Leafs, Bolts, Konas through all different conditions. And it really comes down to the driver, the types of tires you have on the vehicle, really make a big difference on those vehicles.
I want to second that. Good tires make up for a lot of other issues. All-wheel drive does not help if you are running summer tires in winter.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Okay. Do you think it's worth to drive to the East Coast to buy a used EV rather than waiting for a new one here in Ontario?
Hey, if you want to buy a used EV, we have that's what we do. So we do ship around, but once again, you got to look at your costs, got to look at the time it's going to take a vehicle, how long it's going to take to delivery. I've heard some deliveries are up to 3 years now in some vehicles. So we have a lot of customers that come in and they say, like, the amount of time it takes, the savings of fuel. I'm spending $400 or $500 a month on a gas vehicle. They're saying 2 years out. They do the math. They think, hey, you know what? If you do with electric vehicles right now these days, they aren't depreciating. So that's the beauty of them. So I know people have actually, they've gained in value on their vehicles. So, and it comes down to supply and demand too. So.
Okay, I will just quickly touch on the next one because it's related to something we already discussed. They're asking about leaving their EV parked at the airport for an extended period. I would say 7 or 14 days, not a concern as long as it's fully charged and you don't bug it. 30 days is probably pushing your luck if you can plug into a power outlet, even if it's a 120 volt, do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Next
leaving
one
it for a
says,
long period of times like that, you will drain down that battery. Eventually, it will kill itself. So,
next one is what percentage of battery loss due to defrosting windows and keeping the cabin warm on very cold days, minus 30 Celsius?
so that comes down to two things. One, type of heating system on your vehicle, if it's a heat pump system or it's a resistive heating system on the vehicle. So, once again, so it depends on the type of how the heating is done inside the vehicle. It's funny, when I did one vehicle and it had 374 kilometers range on it. And the minute I turned off the heater and climate control system, the vehicle jumped up to 398 kilometers. in range. And then when I turned the heating back on, it dropped down to about 374 kilometers. And then when I turned the fan on high, it dropped down to 330 kilometers. So the fan and all these things are all part of a software program. So they say, hey, you want to increase the airspeed, we're going to increase the amperage to a resistant heater, which will use more energy. So I would say it varies between vehicle. Like honestly, it could be, depends on how long you're doing it, the temperature outside, and the type of heating system on the vehicle. But you can probably see in some cases 5 to 10%, in extreme levels, maybe a little lower on others. So it depends on how much it uses. So I see a lot of vehicles use about 3 kilowatts. So, so once again, it really depends on the vehicle itself.
Okay. Tim, can we fit in one more?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is something top of mind for a lot of people. I'm not electrically inclined and find the knowledge required about kilowatts and kilowatt hours, batteries, range, etc. a bit daunting. It's more complicated than just filling up with gas. Will this hinder general public adoption of EVs, in your opinion? And maybe how can we combat it?
So talking about kilowatt and kilowatt hour. So kilowatt is a power output number. So it's in comparison to horsepower. So right now, if you have like a 90 kilowatt motor on a vehicle, you times it by 1.34 to get horsepower, and reversing it will get you back to your kilowatt. So so kilowatt is about power output, and kilowatt hour is about the size of the gas tank in the vehicle. So the bigger the kilowatt hour, the more energy you can put into it, and further you'll go. So when you go, so if you're looking for an electric vehicle, I always tell people, buy the biggest battery that you can afford in a vehicle. One thing I'll tell you about electric vehicles, and I've been involved with with our dealership and literally hundreds of vehicle sales, is I tell this to everybody. They say, oh no, I only have to drive 40 kilometers to work and 40 kilometers home. That's all I want an electric vehicle for. It's going to be a commuter. I always say, I guarantee you buy an electric vehicle, you will drive it a lot more than you ever will a nice powered vehicle. And they go, no, no, no. And sure enough, 2 or 3 months later, they come back in and they're trading it in on a longer range vehicle, because that's what happens. So kilowatt is about your size of your battery, the amount of energy you can put in, like a gas tank, for the difference between a 50-liter tank to a 100-liter tank. Obviously, the bigger the tank, the more energy goes into there. And battery strength, I just want to be clear on it. Battery strength in a vehicle, if I'm correct in what you're asking the question, is about cycle times of the battery. Batteries are rated by cycle time. So cell phones right now have about 150 to 200 cycles. That means my battery in my cell phone probably degraded to about 70% after about 2 to 3 years. So that means I got to keep plugging in to get it to work. Electric vehicles are a lot higher. They're usually around 1,500 plus cycles on these batteries. So if your car gets a 500 kilometer range, even at 1,500 cycles, your battery will outlast that vehicle. So you're into the 500,000-600,000 kilometer category. So once again, it's once again, when you're looking for a vehicle, looking for an electric vehicle, it's great to talk to people that know the vehicles, can answer your questions at the point of sale, or even some of the associations that are out there. They have great resources on their websites and experts within their field, within the associations, that are super happy to talk about all these different numbers and questions about range and life and so on with electrics.
And David, I think to the questioners, part of the point was, is this all a detriment to public acceptance and understanding of EVs when we get into all this jargon? And I think that from my own way of thinking about it is that we'll simplify the language as time goes on, and people will learn more about, that a kilowatt hour is like a gallon of gas. I mean, it's a measure of energy. And I've got to stop it there. I'm very sorry, but we're right up against it here. Dave, you're always full of great information. We really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very, very much.
Great. And like I said, if anybody has questions, I left my my numbers up there, my emails up there.
And they can also just write back to the webinar, and I
Totally.
can redirect it to you, and I will be glad to do
However
that.
you want to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Perfect.
thanks,
That's awesome.
Jason, a million for persevering today and getting through. And thanks to the rest of the webinar team. They're always, everybody does an important part in making this happen every month. And we really appreciate it. So mining and the environment are almost always part of the EV conversation these days. And so next month on the webinar, we're going to learn how one of the mining industry's biggest financial and environmental liabilities can be turned into a huge resource opportunity. Find out how with the help of microbiology, and man, I flunked science, but this will be very interesting. How the help of microbiology, we can actually extract key battery metals from decades of accumulated mine waste, those tailings that have been piling up forever. Our guest will be Dr. Nadia Mikatuk, who currently serves as a CEO and president of an organization called Merarco. It's a mining innovation company. So please be sure and mark the date, Tuesday, December 6th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all for joining us once again on the episode. We really do appreciate your support. Thanks for coming every month. It means a lot to us. And from all of us at EV Society, and until next time, stay well. This will conclude today's webinar.